Hello everyone. Today's case is yet another one where a young Canadian goes missing and their vehicle is found on a remote rural road. And it's honestly becoming a scary trend because I have a countless amount of cases like this to tell you all. 19-year-old Brianne Ruth Wolgram was born March 25th of 1979 to her parents, Cheryl and Cliff. She also had two older brothers named Troy and Todd, making her the baby of the family. Brianne was described as soft-spoken, sweet, shy, and timid, but also fun, outgoing, and hilarious. There wasn't much information about Brianne's upbringing, but there was tons and tons of photos on the Find Brianne WordPress website dedicated to her disappearance. Photos of her with her friends were aplenty. She seemed to be having a good high school experience. Brianne worked at McDonald's, as well as the Super Save gas station connected to the Frontier restaurant, which were both located on the Trans-Canada Highway in Revelstoke, British Columbia, a small town located 641 kilometers east of Vancouver and 415 kilometers west of Calgary, Alberta, with a population of less than 10,000 people that sits along the Columbia River and the Trans-Canada Highway. In the late 90s, Brianne was still living with her parents, but her two older brothers had already moved out. She graduated high school, writing in her yearbook, and I quote, "A few of Brianne's favorite memories that happened throughout high school were Calgary with KS, MP, AW, and HZ, camping at Laforme, Greece, PE 11, soccer trips, summer 95 with EA and KC, conversations with HM and AS, and the potato war with MP, EA, LG, and KS. Her pet peeves are pushy people, snobs, and slow walkers. Her future plans are to work for a year, attend college, travel, and get married." End quote. After graduating, Brianne spent most of her time either working or hanging out with friends. She was said to have led an active lifestyle, working out at the gym, playing sports, but like most 19-year-olds, she would still attend parties and drink alcohol. However, she didn't smoke cigarettes and she didn't do any drugs. And it wasn't like she was partying crazy and getting in trouble and being reckless. She was, going out with some of her very close friends and they were having a good time. Also, like a lot of young women, Brianne had dreams of going to college and getting married and starting a family one day. Things that she would never get to do. She also had crushes on boys, but she wasn't dating anyone at the time. Not long before she disappeared, Brianne had bought her very first car, a black Acura Integra in pristine condition with gold-colored rims. And she loved that car to death. The summer of 1998 was said to consist of the Beastie Boys blasting from the speakers, Slurpees, and rocky beaches. Despite this, however, on September 4th of that year, a coworker of Brianne's would claim to have seen her crying throughout most of her shift that day. She'd work the 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift at the Super Save gas station. The coworker would continue to go on and say that day Brianne didn't seem to have her mind on work, such as starting tasks but never finishing them and doing transactions incorrectly, which were all things that she knew how to do. But for some reason that day, something was on her mind and something seemed wrong. At one point, she even broke down into tears and had to leave her post, retreating to the staff room at the back of the gas station. Her best friend Christy ended up arriving at the gas station at 2 p.m. for her shift, and by then, Brianne had gotten herself together and nothing seemed wrong. But the next day, on September 5th, everything would change. Brianne would arrive home from work around 8 p.m. that evening. There were plans for her and her parents to go to a barbecue that evening, however, Brianne turned them down, saying that she was tired and she was going to go out later, so she wanted to rest. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Brianne called her friend Christy to make plans to pick her up after her shift, which was ending around 11 p.m. She also told Christy that she would go and pick up a pack of wine coolers for her. Keep in mind the legal drinking age in Canada is 19 or 18 if you're in Quebec, so this was completely legal. I know a lot of Americans get confused when we talk about Canadian cases because it's 21 in the US, but in Canada it's much lower. However, Brianne would never arrive to pick Christy up that evening from work. Instead, around 11:15 p.m., two witnesses would claim to see Brianne at the 7-Eleven connected to the Petro-Canada gas station located in Revelstoke at 401 Victoria Road. Three unidentified females were last seen to be with her who appeared as if they were all friends. Despite being at a gas station, none of the girls bought anything, and then all four of them got into Brianne's car. A witness would end up following Brianne's car as it made a left out of the 7-Eleven's parking lot to go down Victoria Road. He followed the vehicle south out of town before turning off to his own home. At 3:15 a.m., Cheryl and Cliff would end up being awoken to Christy calling them, asking if Brianne was home. Cheryl saying, and I quote, "She wanted to know if Brianne was home. I said no. She said, well, she didn't meet me after work and nobody's seen her. She'd been driving around looking for her. We got off the phone and my husband and I went looking." End quote. Brianne's parents ended up leaving the home and driving through the night looking for their daughter. Their hearts were pounding. They had gotten woken up out of the dead of sleep thinking that, their child was safe somewhere. And now they're being told that none of her friends who she was supposed to be with know where she is. They were just hoping that they would drive by somewhere and see her car maybe parked in a parking lot or pulled over somewhere. Maybe she was having car troubles, and this would all be easily solved. However, they didn't find Brienne or her car, so she would then be reported missing. Days later, a hunter would report to have seen a girl matching Brienne's description at kilometer 18 on the Coquelex Road, a remote rural road about 45 to 50 minutes from the Wolgram's home in Revelstoke. He would also claim to have seen a vehicle traveling in the same direction as the girl. It would also later come out that the hunter had allegedly spoken to this girl when he was driving by. He stopped to talk to her, and she had told him that she was having a fight with her boyfriend, and so she was trying to avoid him. 5 days after Brienne disappeared on September 10th, her car would be found by RCMP Air Services 30 kilometers south of Revelstoke up Echo Lake Road in the direction of the Coquelex Falls and River, right in the area that this hunter had claimed to have seen her.
One more pass.
Okay.
Well, but then you're going to miss the mountain.
What do you mean? No, but I didn't think of that now. But I've been looking at that photograph, and I'm seeing, like Graham said about the trees, there's all this grove of just deciduous trees.
This was a logging road, and her car was found off the road in the ditch and had hit a tree, although it only sustained minor damage. Her car keys would also be found still in the ignition. The driver's seat was also still pulled as close as it could go to the steering wheel, which was how Brienne always liked to drive it. $200 would also be found in the glove box. The money was said to be from Brienne cashing a paycheck. Her wallet and driver's license were also found in the vehicle. In the back seat, the case of wine coolers Brienne was meant to buy Christie was found open and bottles were half drank. And all of these things would mark the red flags that we normally talk about, where something bad seems to have happened to someone. An officer who would later look over the case in 2011 would note that outside Brienne's vehicle, a pack of Kohler's cigarillos were found, a can of Budweiser beer, and an empty air freshener package. Inside the car, one yellow and one red air freshener were hanging from the rearview mirror. A beach towel was found, a pouch of cigarettes on the console between the driver and passenger seats, which looked to either be Players brand or number 7 blues, a 6-pack of Growers Blackberry wine coolers, which you can visibly see 2 coolers still in the box. One cooler is open and the other is closed. The box is also said to be open on one side. The dash and the outside of the car is also noted to be dusty. Foliage around the car is also quite heavy. The passenger door is ajar as described in the media, and the passenger window is open. Keys were placed in the ignition, and they appeared to be in the off position. A size 11's men's boot print was also found in the dirt close to Brienne's car. Cheryl would later tell the media, quote, "It's not like Brienne just to get chummy with some kids and take off with them. She was kind of shy." End quote. I also see noted that dogs would end up picking up Brienne's scent outside of her vehicle as well as at the end of Front Street. Now, what I found really weird about all of this evidence is that cigarettes were found in the car, which was something that Brienne didn't do. She didn't smoke. Also, if she was buying a pack of coolers for her friend, why would she go off to this remote road and open them all? It seems like whoever was with Brienne was having a sort of party out of her car. Now, there would be other witnesses that I'm pretty sure were the ones from the gas station that would end up being hypnotized. And there turns out that there were other people at that gas station when Brienne and those girls were there. CBC would release an article writing, quote, "Lee hypnotized a female friend of Brienne's. Under hypnotism, she told Lee of a guy in a red truck that was hanging around Brienne and her girlfriends. He apparently was leering at the girls. This witness was able to help police come forward with a composite drawing of the guy in the red truck." End quote. So there seems to be some kind of reports of 2 different men in 2 different trucks at the 7-Eleven gas station when Brienne was last seen. A man in a white truck and a man in a red truck. Some who seem to have been leering at her. So could these individuals also be involved? When police ended up going to that 7-Eleven to interview some workers and to collect surveillance footage, an employee would end up telling police that they didn't have any surveillance footage from that day, which seemed to be a very odd thing because apparently the 7-Eleven had cameras, and apparently there might have been footage from all the other days except for that specific day when Brienne was last seen there. Very odd that the specific day that a girl goes missing from the 7-Eleven gas station, they don't have footage of it. Now, could it have just been that the cameras weren't working all the time? Which I feel like in places like that, they normally do have working cameras because there is a lot of theft. It's not like a 7-Eleven is a small business per se where, they just put up fake cameras to deter people. Like, this is a huge chain. You'd think that there would be working cameras. But it's just very odd to me that this happens quite often in cases. Someone's missing and there's no footage, meaning that there is no proof or any visualization of these 3 girls that were witnessed to have been with Brienne. By May of 1999, vicious rumors began swirling around the small town, police saying that it was causing more grief to the family. On top of that, it didn't really seem though like police were really looking for Brienne. They had kind of just marked her off as a runaway, despite all the evidence and who Brienne was to the core screaming otherwise. She wasn't the kind of girl that would just go off with strange people that she didn't know or go party with people she didn't know. There are people like that, who will run into someone at a store or just, friends of a friend, and they'll offer, hey, let's go here. And people will just go off with random people they don't really know. There are people like that. I have known people like that. But Brienne wasn't that kind of girl. She had a very close circle of friends. She wasn't a huge partier. She had plans that night to hang out with her friends. On top of that, no one knew who these 3 girls were. It's a small town. You'd think that everyone would know who she was with. But it seems like no one knew who these 3 girls were. As the years turned to decades, Brienne's family continued to try to press police to take the case seriously and to spread the word of Brienne's case. However, police seemed to have been looking at it like a cold case. They had no evidence and they weren't really focusing on it. But her family still is looking for answers. They still want her back home. And on March 25th of every year, her mother burns a candle to commemorate her birthday. An Angel of Hope statue also sits in Woodhead Park to commemorate Brienne. But I also read that vandals broke off the angel's wings and caused other damages 3 separate times, which is just completely awful. Who would do that? A $20,000 reward would also be issued for information leading to Brienne being found or the 3 women being identified. Brienne's mother Cheryl saying on Facebook, quote, "It's like a nightmare you never wake up from, wondering what happened," end quote. She's also spoken about how going to funerals is very hard because funerals mean closure, and that's something she's never had with Brienne. So let's talk about some things, because I have a lot of questions in this case. I have questions such as, where's the DNA or any fingerprints ever found on those cigarettes that were found at Brienne's vehicle or the alcohol bottles that were opened? Now, I've seen that evidence might have been collected, but then I also have seen contradictory information on that. You'd think that there would be a solid, yes, evidence was found, but again, with Canadian cases, it's very hard sometimes to find direct information. On top of that, obviously, I think the biggest questions I have revolve around these 3 girls/women that were last seen with Brienne at 7-Eleven. Who are they? As I said, this is a small town. You'd think that these women would have been able to have been easily identified. Everyone kind of knows everyone, or some friend of a friend of a friend might have known them, but it's been decades and still no one knows who these women are. It makes me wonder, could that hunter on that logging road have ran into one of the women who took Brienne? If that was one of the 3 identified women, maybe she just made up that story to have an excuse as to why she was on that logging road when the hunter asked her. Or maybe it was true. Maybe there were more people involved in this and they started fighting in the aftermath of whatever happened to Brienne, and she stormed off, and that's why the hunter found her. It definitely makes me think that these 3 women are involved in whatever happened to Brienne, or obviously they would have been identified or come forward by now. It makes me wonder if they were from out of town. It makes me wonder if someone for some reason had something against Brienne. We have talked about cases before where an individual hasn't really directly done anything to someone, yet people are jealous of them for some reason, and they're just psychotic and they kidnap or kill someone because of that. And we've definitely heard stories of girls killing other girls over basically nothing. So could this have been one of those cases? Could they have carjacked Brienne and taken her to this remote area, did something to her, partied out of her vehicle, and were just having a good time and then ran off somewhere? But then it also makes me wonder, they must have had another vehicle to get out of that remote area. This isn't an area that you would particularly just walk from. It's in the middle of nowhere, very far into the middle of nowhere. There's not even Google Maps on these roads, okay? I couldn't even, go Street View on there. You're in the middle of the woods. So you'd have to seemingly have someone take you out of that area. So there must be another vehicle involved. It also makes me question, could these women have trafficked Brienne? Because there are stories of women being used to traffic girls. I mean, I guess if we're looking at everything, could it be that Brienne did have plans with someone else? She went to a party, an accident happened, and it was covered up. I guess so, if we want to look at every different scenario. But that would mean to me that these girls that she was with must not have been from the town. They must have been from out of town then. But then how did Brienne meet them if she knew them? But what really truly gets me is that Brienne had plans to go out with Christy that night. It seems like she even went and bought the alcohol for her. So what happened after Brienne bought that alcohol? It doesn't make sense that Brienne would ditch her friend Christy. It was her best friend. They had plans. And again, she seemed to be very close with her small-knit group of friends. And she clearly wasn't that type of person that would ditch out on plans, because immediately Christy and the rest of their friends who she was supposed to hang out with were looking for her. They looked for hours and then called her parents to tell them that she couldn't be found. How many friends could you say would do that? Because I feel like there are so many cases we talk about where someone goes missing and their friends just carry on partying. They just go on with their days, and maybe a few days later they're like, oh, it's weird, she didn't show up, she's not answering anyone. But in this case, Christy's friends were immediately worried. In my opinion, clearly something happened after Brienne bought that alcohol. Maybe she ran into these girls at the liquor store or in the parking lot. Maybe they just asked her to give them a ride somewhere, and then they took advantage of the situation. They could have said, hey, can you drive me to this area? There's a party we're trying to get to. And, Brienne was sober. She might have said, okay, yeah, and then I'm going to go hang out with Christy. But then something bad happened. Brienne seemed to be a very kind person. So it makes me wonder. I don't know if anyone out there who personally knew her, would she have done something like that? Would she have given a ride somewhere to, 3 girls possibly around her age or so that maybe made her feel comfortable? Maybe they lured her to that road and something bad happened to her there. What I also find very strange, though, is that the day before, Brienne was very upset at work, it seems like. Now, could that have just been over, nothing that's even involved in this case, but now that she's missing, it seems like it's important. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. Maybe she had a crush on a guy and he got a girlfriend and she was sad about it. It could have just been something completely unrelated to her being missing. She could have just been having a bad day. We all have those. Or could it be connected to something? Maybe there was something going on that no one really knew about. I do find it really interesting, though, that the keys were still found in the ignition of her car. It looked as if her car had been crashed. Maybe she tried to crash her own car because these people were trying, to kidnap her or something, and she thought if she swerved and, crashed, she would be able to get away. But maybe she couldn't get away. Because that is, a tactic that people talk about. I don't know how good it is of a tactic to crash your car, but I've seen it happen in movies and stuff as well. Someone's carjacking you or trying to kidnap you, and you swerve and crash the car. So, hopefully you can get away. And it doesn't seem like her car crashed very hard. So could it have been something like that? Could it have been a combination of all these things? But clearly something happened to Brienne when these 3 girls intercepted her night. The question is, who are these 3 girls, these 3 women, and what did they do to Brienne? This is an age progression sketch of what Brienne would possibly look like in current times. She would be around 45 years old in this sketch. Brienne is described as a Caucasian female standing 5 foot 2 inches tall and around 130 pounds, with light brown, curly, shoulder-length hair, often worn tied back, blue eyes, and she had a birthmark on the back of her right leg. Brienne was last seen wearing blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and black sandals. Brienne's family is only getting older, and they all deserve answers. There's also a GoFundMe set up to create a reward fund to bring Brienne home. And if the person who brings her home doesn't want the reward, it will be donated to the Missing Children's Society of Canada. If you have any information on what happened to Brienne, please contact the authorities. I'll have the information down below. Clearly, in my opinion, someone out there knows something. Someone out there has to recognize these 3 women. And what happened to cause this sweet 19-year-old girl to go missing? This is definitely a case that isn't getting talked about enough. It's not getting enough coverage. Please go support the family. Please go share out her missing persons flyers. Share out this video. Share out any content that you can. I am shocked that I've never heard of this case. I think these are the kind of cases that we need to continue to talk about, because there's this 19-year-old girl who's just gone and no one's looking for her, it seems like. This case is essentially cold. There's no new information. And if it wasn't for all of you, I never would have heard about it, and I would never be talking about it today. These are the cases that need to be spread. So let's continue to spread them. My heart goes out to the family, and as always, I hope you all stay safe out there. Lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.